Okay, and with us in studio right now, Moti Cristal, who is a former Israeli negotiator. Hello to you. And also Ariel Wolstein of Israel Hayom. Hello to you. There is a lot at stake here, Moti. Obviously, I'm turning to you first because you had the pleasure of going through a round of attempts to get both sides to agree on one thing, or just sit next to a table. President Donald Trump seems quite confident that he can deliver that deal. What will he have to face?
He will have to face a complete mistrust or distrust between the two leaders, and I do have some confidence in what we start to see, because he starts to engage it from a different perspective. And the big difference, which is different this time than the previous times, is the regional approach. The moment we start to discuss regional, the moment that he travels to Saudi Arabia, the moment that he endorses the Saudi initiatives, the moment that he looked at the region rather than focusing on this very old paradigms of trust and confidence building measures, which are no longer relevant, definitely not within the context of Netanyahu and Abbas, when he starts to move from a bilateral paradigm towards a regional paradigm.
But that has been tried before.
No, it was never tried. It was never. The closest...
The regional approach, the Arab initiative.
The Arab initiative was rejected by Prime Minister Sharon, almost ignored by Prime Minister Olmert.
And sadly, I have to stop you for a minute. We're looking at live pictures right now. Actually, there we go.
Peace treaty. You would love to see that, wouldn't you? Huh? And David Friedman, likewise, one of the most successful lawyers in the United States, and he said, I want to do something. He's your ambassador, as you know, David Friedman. So we're very honored to have the two of you working so hard to try and bring about peace. And I think you'll be very successful. And if you're not, you'll get blamed, because I just put it on record that you're going to do it. So it's all right. But my staff has been fantastic. And as you know, Rex, Secretary of State, has done an incredible job. We just got back from the Middle East. We just got back to Saudi Arabia. And we were treated incredibly well. And there's tremendous, really good feeling toward Israel. And I will say, one of the things, I think you can call it an outreach, but what's happened with Iran has brought many other parts of the Middle East toward Israel. And you could say that's one of the, if there's a benefit, that would be the benefit, because I've seen such a different feeling toward Israel from countries that, as you know, were not feeling so well about Israel not so long ago. And it's brought a lot of folks together, and I think you've seen it, and you've even mentioned it on many occasions. So that is a real positive, and we're very happy about that.
Every challenge creates opportunities.
It's a challenge and it's an opportunity. But you have a great opportunity right now. There's a great feeling for peace throughout the Middle East. I think people have just had enough. They've had enough of the bloodshed and the killing, and I think you're going to see things starting to happen. What we did over the weekend was... They say there's never been anything like it ever before, and it was really a coming together. And now today being in Israel is just very, very special for us. So we expect to have some very interesting talks.
Absolutely. We are praying for peace, and we are pushing for peace for the last 100 years. And with God's help, somebody will bring us peace, all together. All together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I want to use this opportunity to talk about something which is more substantial.
And we're looking at live pictures from the president's residence. Before that, that was this press gathering of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, basically sitting next to the President of Israel, Rivlin. We've heard President Donald Trump there discussing his trip to Saudi Arabia, where he just came from, scenes that, to quote the President of the United States, have never been seen before. With me in studio, still obviously with me in studio, a former negotiator, Moti Cristal. I stopped you beforehand. The regional approach clearly was not picked up by Ariel Sharon, but it's not a new approach.
Well, it's not a new approach, but it never served as a basis for any true regional negotiation. John Kerry, 2016, tried to do again the bilateral with a little bit what I call it Sunni breadcrumbs, basically an Israeli-Palestinian, the famous failed no zone of possible agreement Israeli-Palestinian deal, supported by a little bit of photo op diplomacy. Trump, as far as I also familiar with what happens behind the scenes, Trump people, Jason Greenblatt, is very interested in trying something completely new. And the only new game or the only new paradigm in town is do not focus on the Israeli-Palestinian no possible deal, definitely not with Netanyahu and Abbas, and try to zoom out and look at regional concession exchange. If the Sunni countries will be able
sadly,
to...
I'm stopping you once again.
It's a Trump.
As negotiations, I'm sure, as a negotiator, I'm sure you're used to that. Let's go straight live back to the Israeli president's residence in Jerusalem, where the presser of Donald Trump and Rivlin is about to start. Eli Hochenberg standing by. Eli, everybody awaiting the arrival now, the entrance of the president?
Yes, indeed, Yael. And only a short moment ago, all the what we call the press pool, both American media representatives and some from the Israeli side exited the room in which Trump and Rivlin are now meeting. Liran, our cameraman, will now show you the rooms. In one room on the right side, Trump and Rivlin are now convening. And on the left side, the first ladies, Melania, Nechama, Rivlin, and also Ivanka Trump are discussing as well. After this short bilateral meeting, we're expected to welcome both presidents right here behind me at the podium to deliver short statements, perhaps a bit longer than the ones we've heard at the Ben Gurion airport. And from what we understand from the senior foreign policy advisor to President Rivlin, Rivlin himself will address the issue of the attempts to renew peace negotiations. So really the hot button topics will be addressed at the very beginning of this hectic day. So we will, of course, broadcast live those speeches. But at the moment, really, we're anticipating the presidents to finish their bilateral meeting and arrive here at the podium behind me.
And as we said, Eli Hochenberg, you're standing by there at the president's residence where the commotion is right on the way, awaiting the President of the United States. And Mr. Reuven Rivlin and President Rivlin to stand at that podium. A lot at stake here. We were discussing exactly what is at stake in studio when it comes to negotiating that new deal. Is it now the ripe time, so to speak, for a deal as such, vis-a-vis, as you mentioned, vis-a-vis that Arab initiative, something that can happen now?
I love this question. The answer is definitely not. We're not in a ripe moment. The concept of ripeness has to do with, unfortunately, with bloodshed. Israel and Palestinians and the region are suffering, but not suffering enough. In Syria, yes, but not in the region. We do not see any incentive to move towards peace from the parties. There is an incentive, there is motivation from the president to pursue. I think that what we see today is a start of a ripening process, and I hope that it will move fast enough not to allow the spoilers Hezbollah, Hamas pointed out yesterday by President in that speech.
Pointed out yesterday in that speech, and as we said, everybody was awaiting this visit in the Israeli parliament, where I-24 News' Ariel Levine-Waldman is standing by. I'm assuming it's quite an empty parliament today. Is anybody there? Because we saw them all at the airport.
Yes, there actually are a few people here to talk to us today, because the big question on everybody's mind with Trump now landing and talking to President Rivlin is the following. What can we expect? What should we expect? And what are we going to see coming forward? Now, one of the people coming to talk to us today is Avraham Nuguse of Likud. Now, Avraham, can you tell me a little bit more about what you want Trump to talk about on his visit here, and then what you're actually expecting him to say?
I would like to say welcome to the President Trump and his delegation. And I wish him to have a very productive time here in Israel. And I expect that in his discussions with our leaders will have a subsistence results that will advance the relationship between the two countries, and also bringing to have a true genuine peace process here in Israel. And also we would like to also expect, I expect that he will fulfill his promise on transferring the American embassy to Jerusalem. So these are expected, and I am sure, as he has been good for Israel, as he supports Israel, and I'm sure his visit will even more motivate him to increase his good perception, positive perception for the Jewish state here in the land of Israel.
Okay, and one of the big things we're going to be wondering about while Trump is here, okay, but not the only perspective. Nope, not the only perspective here on Israel's parliament today. Also joining us today is Michal Biran. Michal Biran is, of course, of the Labor Party and bringing in a different perspective. And she's going to be telling us what that is. Now, given that Trump is here, and the big question again is, what should we be expecting? What do you want Trump to say? And again, what are you going to expect him to say?
I have to admit that I find it really awkward to see center-left thinking Trump will be a messiah. It's okay, he's the president of the U.S., we need to be respectful, act according to protocol, but we cannot forget that he's misogynist, incite against minorities, inciting against free media, and a danger to liberal democracy as I know it. And when they're hoping he'll be our savior regarding the conflict with the Palestinians, I cannot see it happening. Because it's not simple as he thinks. It's complicated, and it cannot be solved by someone that's so impulsive and cannot keep track of the same idea for a long time. So I think all the people that hope that he'll be our savior are delusion, and I hope that I'll be wrong.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. Now, again, two very different perspectives here from Israel's parliament. One, that Trump could be ushering in peace and this whole regional solution that everybody thinks might be in the works. And two, that Trump might be too volatile for such a delicate situation and the very delicate nuances of peace in this region of the world. And that's the view from Israel's capital.
Indeed so. Thank you so much. Indeed, words do have consequences in the Middle East. And we're looking at, obviously, live pictures. We're waiting for the President of the United States to begin the official, so to speak, ceremony in the President's residence, Rivlin's residence in Jerusalem. With us in studio also Ariel Bolstein of Israel Hayom, newspaper in Israel. And I'm wondering with you, if we're looking at members of the Israeli opposition saying that Mr. Trump is not the one to deliver peace, but you're editor-in-chief in a newspaper that is aligned with, it's owned and operated by Sheldon Adelson. It's important to note and say, Boaz Bismuth, the new editor of the newspaper, basically sat with President Trump, feels very confident that he can deliver that deal. Why is he that confident?
First of all, we should look and see the bilateral dimension of the Israeli-American relationship now. That is something that we've never seen. Yesterday I was present at the opening ceremony for the 50 years jubilee of the Israeli unification of Jerusalem. The major guest there, the central figure there, was a new American ambassador, David Friedman. And he applauded Prime Minister Netanyahu when the Prime Minister told about the fact that Israel unified Jerusalem forever, that we liberated Judea and Samaria and will never give up our historical rights for this land. He applauded, and that was the American statement. That is something huge. That is a real change for the whole Middle East.
That would be Mr. Friedman, the ambassador.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
And this kind of new approach is seen, is heard in different capitals throughout the world. In Moscow, in Riyadh, in all the other places. That is something that...
True, but then there's also the promise to move the embassy, which will not materialize as we're
I'm not as doubtful as you. I think that that is going to happen, not during this visit, but it will happen during the first term of President Trump.
For the first term, but sadly
sure.
we have a few minutes, just a few seconds to go before the break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with live coverage of President Donald Trump in Israel.
I-24 News' daily and breaking news show, The Rundown, where all your need-to-know stories, insight, and happenings from the Middle East and around the world come to you in the next hour. And watch as we see beyond and bring the world closer to you. The Rundown, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m., only on I-24 News. Politics, economics, business, and technology. Get the real news and the real insight about what's happening around the world. I-24 News' Michelle McCory breaks down the top stories of the day from the Middle East to the U.S. Weeknights beginning at 7 p.m. Only on I-24 News.
And welcome back. May 22nd, 2017, special coverage today as President Donald J. Trump has landed in Israel for a historic, many will argue, visit. I-24 News for the next 26 hours, which is as long as the President of the United States will be visiting Israel and the Palestinian territories. We'll be bringing you live coverage, unprecedented coverage from approximately every corner of this country and the West Bank, all over the place. One can say we're in Bethlehem, we're in Jerusalem, near the King David Hotel, where the President will be staying, as well as every single stop along the way. So, as we are awaiting and looking at live pictures from the Israeli President's residence, that would be Israeli President Rivlin, where President Trump and Rivlin are expected in a few minutes. We can see the press there gathering. President Trump has landed in Israel approximately an hour and a half ago. He has begun his official visit in Israel. He will be meeting with President Rivlin later on with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, expected also to be in Bethlehem tomorrow in the Palestinian territories to meet with President Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority. With me in studio, Ami Kaufman, I-24 News, host of The Spin Room. With me as well also from Israel Hayom, an Israeli newspaper, Mr. Bluestein. Mr. Bluestein, and we were just having a conversation a short while ago. You said that the ambassador, the new appointed ambassador by the American administration, Mr. Friedman, who arrived just a few weeks ago, that he is confident, a few days ago, that he is confident that the American embassy will be moved to Jerusalem. All indications are that that will not be the case.
I'm pretty sure that will happen. I even think that during this visit we will hear something more detailed from the President of the United States. Maybe not the real date of the transfer of the embassy, but we will hear about the procedure, the process that is discussed now in the American administration, because all the signs, all the people who are close to the administration indicating that it is a real serious issue that is now on the table. I think that President Trump is very different from his predecessor, because from the moral point of view, from the civilizational point of view, he doesn't blame both sides of the conflict. President Trump does not think that both sides are equally to be blamed for the bloodshed.
How do you know
He understands not only his declarations, however, the declarations also does have an effect. Because, for example, 1 month ago, we suddenly, out of the blue, heard from the Russians, for the first time in the history, that they do recognize Western Jerusalem as an Israeli capital. That was the Russian reply to the American declaration. So even the declaration itself is very important.
And I think
however, I think that it will materialize.
And again, I think many people in the Israeli coalition right now are hoping it will materialize, many arguing that the signs that will not be the right move to get the two sides to the table. But just to remind you, President Donald Trump, just an hour and a half ago, touched down in Israel. He is expected to be in Israel and Palestinian territories to visit and meet all these very important, crucial meetings over the course of the next 26 hours. We're looking at pictures of about an hour and a half ago. Earlier on, President Donald Trump landed in Israel for a 26-hour visit. It's a stop and what many are describing a very religiously themed visit, or a very religiously themed trip of the President of the United States, his first international foray out of America in a very, very controversial time. Many will argue this is a president who came into office nearly 5 months ago, less than half a year, already facing what many will argue quite an upheaval, quite a road up the Capitol Hill, so to speak, to maintain that presidency. But he is in the Middle East, and we just heard the fact that everybody's discussing what will he say on that stage. With us still, with us in studio, still former negotiator Moti Cristal. Let's say the embassy of the United States is moved to Jerusalem. What will that do for the possibility of negotiations?
It will do great. I hold probably the opposite political views of my colleague Ariel. However, from a negotiation point of view, if the U.S. will move, not declare, will move the embassy now, it will be a great showcase for the future Israel, Jerusalem, capital of the State of Israel. Of course, U.S. and other countries will follow up by establishing their representation, consulate, embassy on the Palestinian part, on the Arab part of Jerusalem. That will signal probably the most tremendous visible sign of how permanent status, permanent status relationship looks like. I do not support, as a negotiator, the essence of don't do things because of fear of violence.
Do you think there'll be violence?
Even if there will be violence, I'm not a security.
That's what security experts say.
Security experts are saying there will be.
That's fine. I will accept that. And then I said, so what? Are we concluding or planning our steps? What should be done? Based on the risks? You know how many people decided to travel to Jerusalem today, despite the fact that there were some risks
No,
or
but
traffic?
it's safe to say that that's slightly different. For looking at the last 2 years, what many were describing the knife intifada, and the specific flashpoint of it is Jerusalem because of all that it means. We don't think that the reaction on the other side...
If we do have, and this move, of course, will be tailored with our new allies in the Sunni world, if this will be tailored, coordinated with the Sunni states, I believe, and probably this is the only thing that I agree with Prime Minister Netanyahu at the moment, that moving the embassy, American embassy to Jerusalem will contribute to peace because it signals how permanent status will look like.
So you're saying it would only happen after the regional initiative starts to move a little more
Definitely.
It wouldn't happen by itself, out of the blue.
It cannot be done out of context. It should be, and if we speak about, you spoke, Ami, about confidence building measure, I would expect Netanyahu, as a great negotiator, to come to Donald Trump as a great negotiator and said, I gave something to you, give me something in return, which is great because the Riyadh speech and the issue of, put aside human rights, brings back the conversation into a very practical, instrumental realpolitik. I would dare to say Putin-style diplomacy. I care about actions on the ground. The issue of values are no longer relevant. We see what happened in Syria. No foreign policy is driven by values today. So let's be instrumental. Let's move the political process. I'm not using the word peace. Let's move the political process forward. Let's make some concession exchange or trust building, but not only between Israel. Israel gives to the Palestinians, but also the Palestinians, the Arab world, America gives to Israel. It will, in one move,
if that embassy, I give you some, then you give me back.
Oh yeah, it was Netanyahu.
And with all the security concerns of what can happen,
Israel is strong enough to deal with any security concerns. Please, in order to move forward, don't threaten us with violence. I think this is a very argument for those who oppose political process. Those who oppose peace, they said, Hamas will stand up. If we need to move towards a two states because this is the Israeli interest. Israel paid price. Israel lost life. We celebrated the 50th Jubilee of the reunification of Jerusalem. It was a great move. Now all the protocols are clear about the decision whether to enter into the old city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is ours. The old city belongs to the Jewish people. We will need in a deal. We will need to share it with the Palestinians. But what is ours?
I was about to ask the residents of East Jerusalem. What are they?
Oh, if you want,
they
I can
hugely support being part of Israel. According to all the sociological studies, some kind of 75–80% of them declare that they want to be part of Israel. They want to be Israeli citizens. They actually do understand the pleasure of Israeli democracy.
I'm laughing because both of you look a little bit, well, confused. Yeah, we need to completely throw away the Clinton-Obama Kerry paradigms. They're no longer relevant in
and then
the
question is, Sally, the question is, has that paradigm been thrown away and something new as policy will be announced in the next 26 hours? Don't go anywhere. We're taking a short break.